So in the last video, we went over the general idea behind what a function is. We said that a function is a machine that takes in an input, does something with that input, and produces an output. Now we're going to go over some other useful terms and ideas related to functions that you're going to come across a lot. First term that we're going to go over is domain. So domain is the set of allowed inputs. The idea here is that we can design functions that will only allow certain inputs. For example, we could create a function that only allows even numbers. It doesn't want any odd numbers. Or we could create a function that only allows numbers that are divisible by tens, like 10, 20, 30, 40. That would be two examples. We won't go over the specific notation right now. We're just trying to get the idea across. But for example, if we said that this specific function only allowed inputs of 3 and 5, we would say that the domain is 3 and 5. Okay, so that's the first thing I wanted to briefly go over. The next term that I wanted to go over was range. So range is very similar to domain. Range is a set of allowed outputs. So we could design a function that we know is only going to produce certain outputs. For example, we could have a function that only produces odd numbers. We could have a function that only produces numbers greater than 100. And again, I'm not going to go over the specific notation for this, just going to go over the general idea. So for example, if we created a function that we knew only produced numbers from 8 to 12, so like 8, 9, 10, 10.5, 11.2, we would say that the range is 8 to 12. So the last thing that I want to go over is graphing. Whenever we're introduced to a new kind of function, we generally will want to see what kind of graph it produces. So that's why I feel it's important that we go over this. Why don't we look back at the previous function that we designed in the last video? Y is equal to x plus 2, the function that adds 2 to the inputs. We'll once again consider an input of 3, x is equal to 3. With x is equal to 3, we have y is 3 plus 2 is 5. So for an input of 3, or x is equal to 3, we get an output of 5, or y is equal to 5. We can write that as a coordinate pair. So we could write it as 3, 5, where the first value is the x value, and the second value is the y value. So the question would be, how do we plot that coordinate, that point, onto the graph? Well, you notice on the graph that we have the axes labeled as x and y. The horizontal line is the x-axis. It refers to the x value of the coordinate. Similarly, the vertical line is the y-axis, so it refers to the y value of the coordinate. Looking back at our coordinate 3, 5, if we wanted to plot that on the graph, we would notice that the x value is 3. So we would look at our x-axis, look for 3 and mark that down. Then we would look at the second value in our coordinate 5, so that's our y value. We would take a look at the y-axis and look for 5, mark that down, and then we could trace those two lines to the point and plot that point. So that is one of the points that our function produces. We could do another input. We could try x is equal to negative 4. We never said we can't use negative numbers. Negative numbers are fine. We could use x is equal to negative 4. That would give us y is negative 4 plus 2, which is negative 2. So for an input of x is equal to negative 4, we get an output of y is equal to negative 2. And once again, we could write that as a coordinate pair with negative 4, negative 2. The first value is negative 4, so we could look at our x-axis, look for negative 4, and mark that down. The second value is negative 2, that's our y value. So we could look at the y-axis, look for negative 2, mark that down. Good, we've done that. We can now trace those two indents to a point on the graph. And now we have another point or coordinate that the graph produces. And now that we've done that, we can actually connect these 2 points to form a line. And that line is the graph that the function produces. So that's just one example. And the other thing is, we could have done as many points as we liked, as many inputs as we liked. We could have done 1,000 as an input, we could have done negative 500 as input. That would mean that this line is not the complete graph. It could have extended to larger numbers, and to indicate that, we put arrows, just to show that it continues and extends. So that's all I wanted to go over for this video. In the next videos, we'll be going over the first kind of function that you'll be introduced to. It's called a linear function. But for now, thanks for watching, and hope to see you again soon.